the beat, off the beat, off the beat, off the beat, off the beat. Real, authentic conversations. Podcast. What's up, everyone, man? This is your host, Jorge Ambriz, right here from Offbeat Podcast, and it's great to be able to bring this special episode to you guys, man. And I'm excited about this episode. It's something that I have been wanting to do for some time now, and I've been following our special guest. I've been following him for some time now, and I've been seeing what he's been doing through his organization and his personal life. And honestly, it's his testimony, his story has really touched my life. So it's an honor to be able to have you. Mark, what's up, man?
Hey, it's good to be here, George. Thank you so much for connecting, and it's always an honor whenever I get to share what God has done. It's all about His work of restoration and healing that I know and believe is available to everyone.
Yeah, man. So, and yeah, like I said, I've been following you for some time, your personal page, and then also your you have tell us a little bit about what you do, man.
Yeah, for sure. So I started this ministry called Offline, and it's based off my testimony. I know we'll go into more of that, my story and everything. But my struggle was with pornography, masturbation, lust in like whatever form that drew me in. It was like that's what I struggled with, and so I started I call it a transformation or healing journey about 7.5 years ago, and then which led to starting this ministry called Offline. So I now have a coaching program where I've been helping other guys just walk through the same steps that helped me experience the growth, the transformation, coming out of the darkness. So we have online groups. I'm starting up some in-person groups as well. I live in the Sacramento, California area. And also we collaborate, because this isn't just a male struggle, but there are women out there struggling as well with pornography. So we collaborate with a ministry called Storm and Armor, and the lady who leads that, her name's Stacia. So we're like partners in that, so we can reach both men and women who are ready to be free.
That's awesome, man. And that's why I was so intrigued by when I found you on social media, man, was because there's not a lot of talk about this subject. Like, let's be honest, as far as the side of healing, the side of being set free, it's, of course, it's mostly something that's encouraged, or something that it's kind of just like, whatever, it's kind of just freely talked about, but not in a way where it's like nobody really talks about, hey, I want to be free from this, And so why don't you share a little bit about your background, about, your story, and how is it that you became so passionate about this subject?
Yeah, of course. So, of course, I can go way back to where it first started. And this is something I help others with too, is understanding that there was a process to get to where you are today, the way that you're struggling. It wasn't this overnight, one-time event. So if I were to go back, I could go all the way back to when I was like 10 years old, or 9 or 10 years old, having like my first crush on a little girl in Sunday school, right? I'm only a 9, 10-year-old kid. And I have all these emotions and feelings, right? Oh, you like discover women, you're like, this is so cool. And then I get these J.C. Penney magazines in the mail. It used to be this thick book. I know kids these days have no idea what that is, but it was like a thick type of magazine book, like brochure, that had like all the products you want to buy, clothes and shoes. And then there was the lingerie section, which always just drew me in. And again, I'm a kid, and all I know is like, wow, this just looks amazing. So I keep going back to it, and not knowing how to respond to what I was feeling, right, in the way that God created me to. So it became this secret thing, which would lead up to eventually discovering pornography when internet, and I'm telling everyone kind of how old I am now. It was when there was dial-up internet.
Yeah, the dial-up, man. Yeah.
You had to wait forever. So many times you just kind of give up on using it because it was so slow. But that's where my temptation with pornography started. About 13 years old, And then for the first time, I'm exposed to all these images of these naked bodies, and that's actually where I learned about sex and how it works. I didn't know. I didn't learn about it. I was homeschooled, so there wasn't that. I didn't have that talk where a parent sits you down and kind of awkward about it, and then
Yeah.
asks how how babies come into the world. So that talk didn't happen for me. So which kind of fueled the secrecy even more, because I'm thinking to myself as a kid, well, okay, no one else is really talking about this, so let me
Yeah.
just keep this to myself. Let me just hide this. I don't need to talk to anyone about it. I'll be okay. But also at the same time, growing up in church and being a pastor's kid too, I did have this. I've always had, as far as I can remember, this genuine love for the Lord. Like, I wanted to follow God with all my heart. That desire was there.
Yeah.
That desire never left. It was there my whole life. So even with that heart, still, that secrecy crept into my life. And going through time, we could go through the timeline. Of course, there's multiple events, but eventually I get married. So I meet this amazing young woman when I'm like 20. I think I was like 23 at the time, something like that. And I have this thought, this belief, false belief, and that's another tool that's helpful for those who are struggling out there. We have to take a look at the false beliefs that we have in our lives, because sometimes we know in our head what the scripture says, and when we memorize it and we go to church and Bible study and we do all the right things, yet we
Yeah.
have these false beliefs. One of the false beliefs that I had was, oh, when I get married, I won't have to worry about lust anymore, right? It's
Yeah.
definitely
And that's
not a biblical thing, right?
yeah. And that's, man, you know what? And let's pause right there for a little bit, because I think that's one of the biggest things. I know even for myself, that was one of the biggest things that I always believed too. I said, you know what? Once once I get into this relationship, once I'm in this, I'll fully commit, I'll fully give myself over, and then I believe that you literally believe that that's going to be the solution to your problem.
Right, right, and like myself and many others who have that expectation, they experience disappointment. So, and another part of that is identifying, well, what was it within me? What was I believing? What was I even expecting? And
Hmm.
so it's like subconsciously, I was expecting my wife to solve my struggle. It was her, as if it was her responsibility to fix me in a sense and set me
Yeah.
free. Like, without really saying that, and I wouldn't have worded it that way at the time, but that's really what I believed. Oh, I get married.
Yeah.
I was actually placing the responsibility on her, which no woman can do that. No woman is meant to do that. Um, of course, we know the scripture says, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." So when we start to understand what the truth actually means, right? Who we are according to God, who others are according to God,
Yeah.
then we are able to walk in
Yeah.
freedom. We're equipped to walk in freedom because we understand what's true. So we're going through the timeline again. I get married. I'm excited. I'm going to be good. It's going to be great.
Yeah.
I'm going to be able to, you know, be intimate with my wife, have sex whenever I want. Yet 3 months into my marriage, I'm already looking at porn again, and I'm like, oh, why can't I stop? And I didn't understand it. And I wake up one morning, and this may have been like 6 months married, something like that. I wake up one morning and my phone is not next to me, and I'm like, I feel really anxious because, well, I don't want anyone to have my phone because of what they would find in
Yeah.
my history. So my heart's racing. I'm like, where is my phone? And number two, where's my wife? Because when I wake up, she's usually right next to me,
Yeah.
uh, sleeping, or we can kind of get up around the same time. And then she comes to the room, and she's just in tears, and she's like, I know what you've been looking at. And of course, the first thing I do, I try to lie, like I've been lying for years about this issue.
Yeah.
Oh, well, what did you find? And ask those questions, hoping that they didn't find it. But then there's no covering it up anymore. She found out. So unfortunately, my struggle didn't stop there, because here's what happened. I told myself, here's another lie. I could do this by myself if I just try a little harder. I could do this on my own. I don't need to involve others. I don't need to open up to others.
Yeah.
I'll figure it out. My wife's fear is going to be enough, and I'll change. Yeah, I went back to the same cycle too many times. And about 5 years married, that's when my struggle progressed. And I was not a faithful man. I was not faithful to my wife. I was not only unfaithful with this content I was looking at online, but I was unfaithful physically with another woman. And this is me, a pastor's kid. I knew all the scriptures. I went to church.
Yeah.
I believed. Yet this struggle progressed over time. And I think it's important that I point out, especially to the believers listening, that you can still be struggling with something like this in secret. But the thing is that it progresses, and you don't know when it's going to progress to a certain point. You don't know what situation you're going to find yourself in. And because that path of that habit has already been paved over the years, you're going to be more susceptible to other sexual sin that maybe you told yourself, I would never do that. I mean, I got married never imagining I would not be faithful to my wife. I grew up, I had a purity ring when I was a teenager, right?
Yeah.
But it's a lie, and it's a trap of the enemy. Those lies, those little lies, right? And Jesus said, it's the little foxes that spoil the vine.
Yeah. Yeah, man. And I think that so many people, it's one of those subjects, man, that so many people struggle with. And I kind of shared a little bit, that was something that I struggled with a lot, growing up. And that's why this subject is so dear to me, because it's one of those things, man, that a lot of people don't talk about because they're scared of how they're going to be viewed. I think that was my biggest thing is I was always scared, even as a kid. I remember, I never really had anyone to share with me, like you said, the talk, or, I didn't grow up in a Christian home. My house was just normal house, mom, dad, they worked, they did everything they could to provide and be the best parents that they could, but in the same way, I just became real curious, you know what I mean? Like with the beauty of women, like I was very intrigued. And I don't think that in itself is the problem, like it's, I think physical beauty is something to be appreciated, but when there isn't the right guidance, right? When there isn't the right guidance to show a child to say, yeah, you know what, that's beautiful, right? Or, you know what, this is what marriage is for, or, this is what, that what you're feeling, can we get raw? Let's get a little bit raw. Yeah. Is that cool with you?
Yeah, of course.
So
Always.
so it's like once you start feeling, that I don't know what it is. It's like, that pleasure, where you start waking up with a heart on, you know what I mean? You start waking up, you start like, whoa, what is this? Like, and you start feeling that sensual feeling as a kid, as a teenager. And when there isn't that proper guidance to say, hey, you know what, like, or that comfort, I think more than anything too, it's that comfort, like to have someone that you can go to and say, yo, like, what is happening to me? What is happening to my body? Why am I feeling this way? To be able to have those comfortable conversations with your parents, with people, with loved ones that are going to give you the proper guidance, man. And that was so hard growing up, man. I always felt that shamefulness, like where, no, I can't tell anyone this because if I do, what are they going to, and I don't know. I don't remember kind of like I think I was maybe like, I remember that time of dial-up, man. I think I was like maybe, I was like 11 years old, I think. Man, I'm old.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like 11 years old, man, with those dial-up, man, and you know what? Once you enter into that world, man, where things started to become available to you, the secrecy just grew more and more and more,
Mhm.
and then and I remember that's how I started too, man. Like I just started I would browse. I would even hide it from my own brother, like me and my brother, we would share the computer, and I didn't even have that comfort level with my own brother. It was always something that I wanted to just keep to myself.
Yeah.
I felt like I couldn't tell anyone. I felt like I needed to just keep this. And I remember I would look at images, I would print images. I remember I even had a secret hiding spot where I would, hide these images from so that nobody can find them, nobody can, and and it just continued to grow and
Mm.
grow.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and it's a similar theme. Over the past few years, it's a similar theme as the other guys that I've talked to or worked with over the years. Um, I've worked one-on-one coaching with at least a couple hundred guys just in the past like 3-4 years, and that doesn't even include the ones that I've talked to at live events when I'm speaking or when I'm performing spoken word music and stuff and sharing my testimony. There's all those stories too of people who they just come up to me and they just open up, they just share right there on the spot because most of them, it's the first time they've ever heard someone speak so directly on the topic
Yeah.
as I usually do. So, but yeah, the similar theme of that shame, and it's like the guys I've talked to, it's like they're on either side of the extreme. One that it was too shameful for them to talk to anyone about,
Yeah.
or the other extreme, it was too acceptable, where it was just like
Yeah.
normal, and like
Yeah.
there was porn everywhere, or their dad's magazines were everywhere, and it was like, oh, here you go. There's just a kid, his
Yeah.
uncle's hanging him a magazine or something. So it's like these two extremes that it's like neither of them are the solution. They both
Yeah.
cause right destruction to our lives, to our minds.
Yeah, and it's so true. Like what you said right now is that it's either extreme, because that's exactly what happened in my situation. That's exactly what happened was that at first it was the extreme that nobody was there to talk to, but then it went to the other extreme when I started to get a little bit older. I want to say like when I 12, 13-year old. I think at 13 years old, I think that's when it really started to I'm sorry.
No worries.
I think at 13 years old, I think that's when it really started to get things up. It really started to, like, my curiosity. I started that's when I really started going deep into masturbation and watching movies now and getting a hold of videos and things like that. And it was in those moments that I remember that's when I moved to Mexico. I had moved to Mexico, and I was over there for about 2 years in Mexico. And over there, man, it's a whole different culture. It's a whole different culture, man. And it's not to bash my people or anything, man, but over there, man, that's like kind of like that's like your gateway to manhood. Like your gateway to manhood is like, it's normal to masturbate. It's normal to look at images. If you don't have a couple magazines or a couple videos stashed somewhere, man, like, are you even a man? It's like where that's how manhood is. It's like, yeah, you're a man when, that's what you should be doing. You should be looking to have sex. You should be looking for your next partner. You should be, that machismo, that
Yeah.
machismo attitude where it's like, that's what's going to make you. Now you're graduating to manhood. So I became exposed to a whole nother level over there, because it was something that it was just normal, man. It was just the normal part. Like when we would have downtime, free time after school, after work, that was the thing to do. We would just, hey, hop on let's go to somebody's house, you know what I mean? Like close the door and let's watch a movie, or let's go over and where we'd be somewhere, isolated by ourselves, and somebody would pull out the magazines, and and that was just part of normal life, man. And but it was that extreme, man. It was such an extreme where it was like, at first it was like, I didn't want anyone to know about this problem. I'm gonna hide it as much as I can. I don't want anyone to know what I'm doing. To the other extreme, to where it was like, yo, this is acceptable. Heck yeah, like, okay, yeah, let me borrow that magazine. Let me do this. Let me do that. You have this video, I have this video. Let's trade. Let's do this. Welcome to manhood. It was kind of like a door that just opened right there, where it was like, man, this is okay. This is what it's about, I guess.
Yeah. I definitely hear that, and I hear that a lot. Similar experiences of men who are seeking help, who want to overcome the struggle and the cycle. And that's another thing I talk about a lot too, or what I call the myths of manhood, because they're the lies.
Yeah.
In a sense, right? The enemy is the father of all lies. It's like all of this is based on a lie. Lust is based on a lie. Pornography, it's not even real. It's all based on a lie. And so it's important that we also break down, right, those myths of manhood. One is, like you said, that this is what being a man is. And this is the gateway to manhood. This is part of just growing up, and then finding the truth in that, right? Because we know, just like you talked about earlier, it's normal for a man to notice the beauty of a woman and to notice that she's attractive. Okay, that's not sinful. I mean, if it was, then why would God have given us eyes and just made beautiful things, right? There's so many other beautiful things in the world. It's not just there's not just attractive women. I like my hat. That's why I bought it, right? It just looked good to me. So, but there's a place for everything. So
God gave us taste.
right, there you go.
Yeah.
Man. I mean, he obviously had taste, so we're his children, so we get some of that from him.
Yeah.
But breaking down those myths is so important, because if we were to sit down and ask men who are married or in a serious relationship, or with families, if we were to ask them, hey, do you want to be loyal to your wife? Do you want to be committed to your wife? Do you want to really just be a good husband and the best family man you could be, or whatever, something along those lines? They would probably say yes. And so many in the world, they want to say, okay, this is normal for men to just look at porn and to just do this, maybe just sleep around, have sex with whoever you want, even before you're married, they may say. But that doesn't even make sense, because if you want to be in a committed relationship, you're not even planning properly for it. You're training yourself to be unfaithful already. So all these people who are promoting porn saying it's normal, it's like, well, how are you doing with being faithful?
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. And I think that's why a lot of people, eventually just turn that, well, you know what, this must be the normal way to do it. Because I think that since we failed to prepare, we failed to plan. I know that was my situation too, where it was, I never knew the gravity of what I was doing, until I never knew the gravity of what I was doing, man, until my first marriage. It was because I am divorced. I'm on my second marriage. Right now, last marriage, but you know what I mean. And but kind of before I kind of touch on that, man, it was one of the biggest turning points in my life. And I don't share it a lot. I've shared it with my wife, but I don't really share about it a lot. But I think it's important because, Offbeat Podcast, is all about having real, authentic conversations, and I think that through authenticity, through being real, through being vulnerable, through being transparent, we're able to find the roots of our problems.
That's right.
I think that until we truly are, we're always going to be bound by something. And, one of the biggest turning events for me was when I was 15 years old. When I was 15 years old, I was in Mexico during that time. And, again, it was one of those things that it's advertised, like, be a man, be a man, be a man.
Mm-hmm.
Being a man is having sex. Being a man is Yeah, you're masturbating. Yeah, you're looking at magazines. Yeah, you're doing all this, but you got to get a woman. You got to get a woman, and you got to lose your virginity. And that's what I was taught. That's what was in my mind, that's what's going to graduate me to manhood. And so, I remember the somebody that was close to me, actually, a friend of mine. It was me, a friend of mine, and then a close friend. He had a surprise for us. He said, "Hey, you know what? You guys want to go do this? You guys really want to do this?" We're like, "Yeah." So we went to the capital. The capital there in Michoacan is called Morelia, and they took us right there to the red line district. Where prostitution rings and brothels and all that. And and I'm not gonna lie, if I would have been honest, I was nervous. I was scared. I was a 15-year-old kid.
Yeah.
I was not close to even being a man, even though I wanted to pretend to be a man. But it was more that I just wanted to prove something. And I remember, going, and you go, you pick the person that you want to be with, and you pay the fee, whatever. They take you up to a room, and at that point, like, I felt like the very opposite, man. I didn't feel like I was graduating into a man. I honestly felt like my manhood was being stripped from me.
Right.
If I'm 100% honest, because I didn't know what I was doing, and I wasn't in love. It was a rushed process. It was everything that I had been looking at and everything that I had been watching. It was the complete opposite. It was one of the worst experiences, but I think that at the same time, it was a door that I opened at that moment.
Yeah.
Where it just graduated me into a whole different realm of sexuality, man. A whole different realm. Where my lust problem it just grew. It grew, and it grew to the point where I didn't ever want to feel like that again. So it made me a person that wanted to now be in control of that, in control of how I wanted it to feel, controlling how I wanted to discover it, and it just led me down a real dark, and after that, it was hard for me to be intimate, even though I was still a teenager.
Yeah.
But it was very hard for me to be intimate. It was very hard. I was already dealing with anger issues and different issues that I was already dealing with, with my own personal life, but now dealing with lust, and I was having relationship issues. I couldn't, I couldn't be faithful to my girlfriends. I couldn't just keep one girl. Like I felt like I never wanted to give myself just to one person. I continuously wanted to just seek the adventure, because as long as I was in control, at least, and I don't know if you've ever felt like that, or through your process, or if you've ever talked to any people that have gone through something similar like that.
Yeah, there's always each story is a little unique, but there is that progression, and you use the word control. That's a big one too. We like to feel that we're in control, that we're choosing, and yeah, whenever I was looking at pornography, I was picking. Like, I want to pick the one that's most attractive to me, or the one that turns me on the most, and so like this searching until you try to find what feels like the best, but it ends up being not enough. You end up just needing more than that, more than what you've been looking at. Yeah. So and that's why that's a big reason why I was not faithful to my wife. And I tell my wife all the time, I think God spared me from a lot more that I could have gone through, because my mom was a great teacher. She homeschooled all 5 of us kids, so I was homeschooled all the way up through high school, and there was a lot of good that came from that. There was still like the lack of knowledge and direction when it came to to sex, and came to lust and all of those feelings, but there was a lot of good too, and I think that was a blessing to me, even in all that. But yeah, there's always this progression of the desire, and I think there's a scripture that talks about that too, kind of how sin progresses, and
Yeah.
it does end up leading to death. It's like we may be breathing, but man, when my addiction got its worst, it's like I didn't even feel like I was alive. I felt so
Yeah.
empty. I felt
Yeah.
so lost. I felt like I had no idea who I was. I was depressed. This is when my wife and I were separated. We were separated for 3 months, and that was when I was at my work. I got at my worst, and I'd slept with another woman, and I told myself, okay, if maybe if I just divorced my wife, I could get married again in the future, and it'll be different. So all
Yeah.
these lies that kind of add up and pile up.
Yeah.
So now I look back, I'm like, oh man, I'm so glad that didn't happen because it would have just got
Yeah.
worse or
Yeah.
been the same with whoever else I would have been with, right? Because the problem
Right.
was here, it was inside me, and then I take that wherever I go. So during that time of being separated, yeah, I just felt, man, so lost, so alone, and I didn't know where to go, who to turn to, and God used that time of being separated to wake me up,
Yeah.
and I was so isolated, so to myself that I didn't know how to be honest, and I
Yeah.
was so afraid of being honest. I had to.
Yeah.
Here's another lie. I thought being honest would be more dangerous than keeping my
Mm.
secrets.
Yeah, let's pause on that a little bit right there because kind of going back to what you were saying is that it started to lead you to depression, right? During the time of separation and everything. And I don't think
Yeah,
that a lot of times we realize the like you said, you mentioned right now that the consequences of sin bring death. And a lot of times, like you said, we're still breathing, but the emotional consequences that we go through, the emotional
mm,
consequences that we feel, and I know that for you it was because you knew who Jesus was. You knew who Jesus was, and I believe you mentioned earlier you always had a deep desire to really serve God and to want to know Him, and His purpose in your life. And but what's interesting though, man, is that a lot of times people will say, well, yeah, it's because you know Jesus. That's why you feel bad. But in all reality, if I'm honest, I didn't know
mm,
Jesus. I wasn't saved. I didn't grow up in church, but I still went through all those
mm,
emotions, bro. You know what I'm saying? Like I still went. I remember like being like I said, if I'm honest, at 15 years old, come on, I'm a 15-year-old dude. I'm a young man. You know what I mean? Like my mustache is barely coming out. You know what I mean? I'm over here losing my virginity to a prostitute, bro. You know what I mean? Like,
mm.
and it was like one of those things that, yeah, on the outside, like you had people being like, yeah, yeah, you're a man, you're a man. But inside of me, bro, I was dying. Like I was
Yeah,
dying, bro. I was like, bro, like I'm doing this? Like did I really just do that? Did I really just
mm,
use like, an intimate moment and I spent it on that, bro? You know what I mean? Like inside of me, man, like it was devastating. It was devastating, and that's why
mm.
I love this subject so much. Not that I love it, but I'm so
Huh,
passionate
yeah,
about these type of subjects because a lot of times people think that, oh, that's only a problem, once you go into the church. Once you're in church or once you have God, then you start to feel guilty about all these things. But that's not true, man. You know, even
mm,
even before you come to God, if you're when you struggle with that, deep down inside, we can make it look like, ah, yeah, man, what I mean, it's the thing to do, it's cool, but deep down
mm,
inside, man, once we're finished doing whatever we're doing, we still go back to that state of loneliness. We still go back to
mm.
that state of, man, feeling, ah, man, what did I just do? You know what I mean? Like there's something. Every time we do something like that, every time we look into those images, every time it's like something inside of us is lost, right?
Yeah, yeah. That's good. That's a really powerful perspective too, because my perspective is different because I grew up with the Bible in my hand, basically.
Yeah.
But you have a different story and like a different side of it, in that even when you didn't know Christ, you had like this. It's like God gives all of us like this, like some kind of sensor, like a sensor when something's just not right, and we know, okay,
Yeah.
this is, we know what's right and wrong, right? We kind of know
It's
the
like
basics.
red flags, red flags.
Right, right. Yeah. Yeah, so something was going off in you, yet it's like you're being taught by people who think a certain way. So it's like, well,
Yeah.
it probably felt like, oh, this is just the way to live then. I kind of
Yeah.
gotta go along with what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah, man. But when it really, I know for me, when it really hit me, and I think and that's why I can also relate to what you said, even after when you were going through your separation, was because, I remember when I got saved. Um, when I got saved at 18 years old. I was 18 years old when I got saved, so I was a young man. And
Yeah.
honestly, for about, I want to say for about 2 years, man. So yeah, for a good 2 years, man, I felt like I had it in control. Like I really did. Like I wouldn't think
Mhm.
about it. Um, I mean, I would think about it, but it wasn't something that I would, go after. I really felt like I'm like, man, but it wasn't until I actually started dating at that time. At that time, I started dating my who was my first wife, and when we started dating, that's when everything just started to resurface again, bro. You know what I mean? Like
Mm.
all those that lust, that desire, like everything, like man, like like
Mhm.
that everything that you go through as a man. You know what I mean? Like because now you have because for like I said, for those 2 years, I wasn't dating. I wasn't I wasn't going on dates. I didn't have a girlfriend. I wouldn't go around women that way. I was really trying to take care of myself because that's kind of like what you're taught to do. But I never dealt with the real issue. Like I never opened up. Like I
Yeah.
never went in with someone and said, with a counselor, with a pastor, or with leaders and say, yo guys, you know what? I've struggled with this my whole life, and now that I'm saved, what should I do? Like I never felt open
Mhm.
enough to talk about that stuff because it was still a shameful. It was still for me. It was a shameful thing. It was still like, yo, like all these things that I've done before is not really something I want to bring out to the light. God forgave me for it.
Yeah.
Um, let's leave that there. But without knowing that once I did start to date, once I did start getting close to a girl again, once the smell of the girl started to come again, once all those past patterns, started to come back.
Oh,
They started to resurface, and those desires started to come back again. Can we talk a little bit about that? Because
yeah.
it's like, I think a lot of times it kind of goes with what we're talking about, that sometimes you're like, I got this. I can deal with this on my own.
Yeah. 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 And I used to go through some of those seasons too, because though I was struggling, obviously with pornography and then lust and masturbation. Though I was struggling, I would justify it at times, telling myself, "Oh, it wasn't that bad," or "It only happened twice this week," or I would downplay. Here's a part of lust that I think can be downplayed. So maybe there are people who are going to watch this and they're like, "Well, I don't look at porn." Well, okay, but are you struggling with like these images on Instagram? I hear there's a lot of stuff on TikTok, that's borderline porn. So it's like we could kind
Yeah,
of downplay the content in order to make ourselves feel better, not realizing what we're actually doing to ourselves. We're actually harming our own minds and our own hearts, and that transmits to everyone closest to us. So that happened to me. I would downplay the struggle. So sometimes I would be, oh, I was just looking at women on Instagram. So that's not so
yeah,
bad. So I kept doing that over time, and then sometimes it was porn, right? When I couldn't. I felt like, oh man, the Instagram's not enough. I would get tempted and go to porn. But then I was telling myself, oh, it only happens once in a while. And then sometimes, when I felt I was doing really good, maybe a couple months. But I hear the stories though of guys who are like, I felt like I had it under control for a long period of time. Once in a while, I'll hear guys just like you said. It's been a year, and I wasn't looking at porn. I wasn't struggling. I felt I was doing good, and that's where it's still easy. It's still easy for the enemy to isolate us to isolate ourselves, right? Because we've convinced ourselves, like you said, I got this. I can do this by myself. But when we involve others, it's like how much room does the enemy have in our lives when we have like a team around us, right? When we're united with the people God's placing in our lives, but with transparency, right? Because you probably sat in atmospheres, churches, and in small groups where it's like, man, no one's talking about the real stuff. No one's. It's like, and then maybe if you worked up the courage, and I've been in this situation where I was the only one willing to have those talks.
Right.
And no one else knew how. And it just goes back to a lot of layers, right? Again, the upbringing, no one talked about it. So why are they going to do it? Everyone's scared of what the other might think. All that, right? We got to work through. So it's like we got to be able to have those conversations and connections with one another. And when we do so, it provides safety. A multitude of counselors, there's safety.
Yeah, and there's always that fear. I think there's always that fear. I know for me, it was that fear. It was that fear because it was that fear of what are they going to think of me? What are they going to think? And then there's always that. There's always something about sexual sin. There's always something about sexual sin that makes us want to hide because we don't want people to see the real us, or we don't want people to get a bad image of who we are. But not knowing that, that's one of the biggest lies. It's one of the biggest lies that is sold to us is that was the biggest lie that I bought into. That, it was like 2 years, because for me it was like, 2 years I was good. And then once I started dating, I started to, that's when I started to really, fall back into, those old habits of, first it started off, with us stepping out. We started to step out, before we got married. We started to, do things that we weren't supposed to. We started to satisfy ourselves sexually in ways that we shouldn't have never, even though we weren't having intercourse, but we would do other things that, it would give us that release. Like it would give me that release as a man, give that release to her as a woman. And, and the thing is that, at that time, it wasn't just a me problem, it was a us problem, This person was also battling with issues, and instead of us going to the safety of people and saying, hey guys, like, you know what, this is what's going on. I was always afraid. I was like, man, if I bring this up, you know what, I'm not going to be able to do this anymore. I'm not going to be able to be a leader anymore. I'm not going to be able to serve anymore. I'm not going to be able to do these things anymore. So we kind of put these, and I know this goes more for people in ministry. I know maybe a lot of people that are going to listen to this might not understand this aspect, but many that may be involved in ministry, and maybe you have this struggle. That was one of the biggest mistakes I made, because there's a lot that I think about after the fact that, if I could have been just transparent with someone, if I could have been honest with someone, I could have had conversations that could have led us down a different path, And again, I know that everything happens for a reason, and a lot of things that happen is because of our choices. And I'm not going to downplay. I decided, we decided to get married in despite of what we had been doing, and in all reality, that was one of the, now that I see it, it was a foolish decision, and I'm not saying that that's the excuse that I'm using, you know what I mean? Like the divorce that happened between me and my first wife, that was a decision that I made, and that's consequences that I've lived with, and that I've learned to live with. And I understand that, in no way, shape, or form do I want to downplay it or anything. But as I do look at it, I was a young man that wasn't allowing God nor others to help me deal with these strong issues in my life. And instead of talking about them, I kept hiding them. And because I kept hiding them, I kept, like we talked about earlier, said, well, you know what? If I just marry this person, then this problem is going to go away. And that was the biggest lie. That was one of the biggest lies. Like, if I just marry, if I make an honest woman of this person, then we can be happy. I'll be happy. This problem is going to go away. We're not going to have to sneak around anymore. We're not going to have to do things in the dark anymore. But man, was that the biggest lie.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, if you don't have self-control before marriage, you won't have it after.
Yeah, and it was a dark path, man. That a lot of people, at the end. In my situation, I know a lot of people got hurt. A lot of people got hurt because of the situation, and even my first divorce and everything. So it was very hard, very, very hard. But at the same time, through that and throughout the years, it's been able to serve as a springboard towards healing. Because then the door started to open to these raw emotions, and I started to understand that it wasn't anyone else's problem. It wasn't anyone else's fault. It was something that, I was not dealing with. And if I'm going to get out of this, if I'm going to work through this, then I need to get real. I need to get raw. I need to really have these conversations, man, because if not, I'm just going to keep repeating the same cycle, same pattern.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good thing you touched on too. We have to get to the roots of what got us to where we are, why we struggle the way we do. And it's not as simple as I just desire sex. It's usually not just that you struggle with porn, but it's also you may struggle with trauma from your past. Maybe you were sexually abused. Maybe as a child you were neglected in some way. It can be linked to not just lust is always linked to something else. I call lust the surface issue. That's what's on the surface. That's how you're acting out here as a result of what's in here. Yeah. So if you get to the roots and then you start experiencing the healing, inviting God into all the parts of your life that you're ashamed of, you're like, oh, I don't want to talk about that. Oh, I'm uncomfortable talking about that. Oh, I don't talk about my feelings because I'm a man. But we all have them. It's like men feel fear, men feel sadness, men get angry. Well, angry is like the acceptable one, but it's like we get scared, we get sad, we feel all that, but we never learned how to deal with it. So instead we like, oh, let me work more. Oh, let me look at porn. So we're like constantly learning to just ignore what's inside, ignore what's going on in here. Not realizing it's setting us up for that pattern of an addictive cycle.
100%, man. And I didn't realize that, man, until I started getting counseling. I started to get counseling, and it wasn't necessarily just for porn. Although, like, throughout the counseling session, all those things started to surface up. They started to come up during these sessions because it was always, I started to learn that certain emotions were leading me to certain behaviors. I started to get deeper, and I'm so grateful, man, that like I said, man, it was, that divorce, although it was unfortunate, man, but it really, year after year after that, it really was a springboard for me to really discover new things about myself, things that I needed to fix about myself, because now I was a father, now I was going into my second marriage now, and I didn't want to keep repeating the same things. but I found myself doing things. I found myself going back to certain patterns. I found myself, and I kept wondering, well, what is it? If I'm not finding the fulfillment in this, I'm not finding fulfillment in, so why? And just like you, I can relate a lot to it. Is like, I wanted to serve God. I wanted to, man. I wanted to please God so bad because I knew what he had done for me. He saved me at 18 years old. And, I was just a drug addict gang member struggling. And he saved me. He literally saved me. And so my heart is so full of gratitude. But here I was, man, in my late 20s, even in my early 30s, like, why am I struggling with these emotions?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then getting that understanding, and the Proverbs talk a lot about that. One I like is in all you're getting, get an understanding. An understanding of what? An understanding of the truth. So as you're growing in your understanding of the truth, you experience this new level of freedom.
Yeah.
And I pray every day, and I believe in Scripture. I quote Scripture. I have Scripture memorized. And people come to me all the time. They're like, okay, so in your program, your coaching program, in your group, are we going to read scriptures and stuff? And I tell them, honestly, we're not going to do a lot of reading. And the reason is because it's all believers, pretty much all believers who join my program, right? That's kind of what I'm called to do. I want to equip God's people to be even more effective, to live out their purpose. Because if we have more God's people well equipped, man, more of the lost are going to be reached. We're going to be able to love on more people, live out what we're called to do, and not always be worrying about what we did last night or last week or, all this stuff. But I tell them, we're not going to do a lot of reading because what I'm called to do is help you apply what you've been reading all these years. All these scriptures you have memorized, those scriptures you just heard at church, I'm going to help you apply them. You already know them in your head. Okay, let's get them in here. Yeah. And that means we have to get into the details. What have you been going through? What did you experience in that moment? Okay, you felt tempted, but what led you to that point? Okay, let's look at some of your history, some of the way you grew up. Like, what are some of the beliefs that you have now, but maybe never paid attention to because of what you've been through? So that's part of getting an understanding, right? What's the truth about who we are according to God? So then we can, this is probably for the ministry folks. I grew up in ministry, so then we can effectively minister to people when we allow ourselves to be ministered to first.
Yeah, 100%, man, 100%. And that's so true, man. And I like what you said, man, that when we're able to understand what we go through, why we went through what we went through, why we react the way we react, when we have a true deep understanding of these issues and these situations that we go through in life, it really does equip us better to serve others. Mm-hmm. It really does, and that's one of the things that I've seen in my personal life, man. It's one of the hardest things has always been for, I remember we had a conversation one time with my wife, and I told her, I'm like, hey, you know what? Because sometimes, we'll work with other couples or I'll work with other young men, things like that. And one day I told her, I'm like, hey, you know what? I think we need to, I asked her, how do you feel? How do you feel about us being open and transparent about some of the things that we've gone through? And I told her, and the reason why is because I think that's the only way that we're going to be able to help them.
Yeah.
And she told me, she's like, look, honestly, she's like, I'm an open book. And it's true. My wife, she's a very open book. She's a very gentle woman. She's very honest, open, transparent. I'm the one that struggles with that. I'm the one that's oh man. So she's like, so you telling me that, honestly, hey, if you're good with it, I'm good with it. And the most interesting thing that started to happen was that once we started to do that, man, people really started to open up in different ways. They really started to feel a level of comfort, that now this is a safe place, and I think that's what we need to do. And that's the whole vision of this podcast right here, of Offbeat Podcast, is, we know some people are going to be probably going to laugh at the conversations we have. People are going to be immature about the conversations we have. And I'm okay with that, man. Honestly, because if that's the way they feel at this moment, hey, that's their opinion. That's what they're going through. That's cool. But you know what? This podcast really is for people that, man, are in their bedroom, that are on their way to work, that are at the job, that are at their lunch table, that are in their car, that, you know, come home and struggle to get out of the car to go in and fellowship with their family and live with their family. Those that struggle to, like, man, I don't even know how to be a dad because of all these things that I've gone through. This is for them. This is for them, because we want to encourage more authentic conversations like this. We want to be able to say, man, you know what, if you struggle with this, dude, it's okay. And that there would be people to say, man, you know what, you struggle with that? Well, you know what, as a matter of fact, let's sit down. Let's go have a cup of coffee, because I have a story that I want to share with you about something that I went through.
That's right. Yeah. That's what I do all the time, man. And I love doing it. And I'm so glad we had this conversation today, because I don't get to talk to many brothers who have this in common with myself, unfortunately, but who can just share transparently, because I experience exactly what you're talking about. When we are open about ourselves, the real story, it like gives others permission to do the same.
Yeah.
They start to step out of their darkness and step into the light. And that's how we overcome sin, with the light. Because it's only the sin that's in the dark that's going to grow. Yeah. And we expose it to the light, it's destroyed. It has to flee. It has to leave.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the only way, man. It really is, you know. It's being able to have those open conversations, and that's why I love what you're doing, man. I really do. I really love what you're doing. And I even wanted to bring you out, you know what I mean, to come and administer to the congregation right here where I attend, because it's something that I think we need to be more educated in, and not just in not doing it, but just on how we treat people that do go through it.
Yeah.
I think that's another thing, is that we maybe you don't have this problem. Maybe you never dealt with this, you know, and maybe you never went through any of the experiences that myself or Mark went through, you know, but still being educated and understanding that if people do come through our congregations, or people do come through our groups, you know, that we can receive them with grace, that we can receive them with love, and that we can say, man, you know what, I've never gone through what you're going through, but I'm going to be here by your side. I'm going to walk through this with you.
Yeah.
And if we need to learn together, let's learn together. If we need to network with other people, with other groups, you know, like you, what you're doing, you know, maybe this can even bring awareness, you know, to other people, to other believers, to people that are going to listen to this, that might know someone that's going through this, and they might be able to connect with your organization or people of like-mindedness and say, man, you know what, if you really want to get out from this, we got you. We're going to help you. We're going to do this together.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, totally. And oh no, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say real quick, because I know people often ask, okay, what should I do now? Because there may be people listening, watching, and they're like, okay, I'm ready to like apply what you're saying.
Yeah.
So maybe just a couple of next steps I want to share real quick. One, obviously, we kind of touched on is, man, get connected somewhere where you're opening up, where you're talking. Maybe it's starting by just right there at your church's small group. Maybe there's a men's group where they are addressing issues like this, and they are being real about it. That's what you're going to need. You're going to need a community like that. But also, don't be disappointed when you try opening up to someone and you hear, "I'll be praying for you," and that's kind of the end of it. That usually just means they don't know how to help you. But don't be discouraged. Plug into the community of people who can encourage you, who can kind of like guide you along the process. And sometimes, like you mentioned earlier, sometimes it's a counselor. I still go to therapy regularly. My wife and I, we go to marriage counseling regularly. Some seasons are harder than others, and we're like, man, we can't do this by ourselves. Yeah. So there's that. There's that. There's my coaching program that I have for men. There's our ministry partner who she works with women who are struggling with porn and lust. So there are options, there are resources, and there are other ministries too. It's not just me that's doing work like this. So there are ways that you can go to a community where you know they're going to help walk you through something specific, so that's the biggest thing I would say is get connected with a quality mentor and group where you're no longer isolating your struggles, isolating yourself, and yeah, I would say that's the biggest thing is getting plugged in, getting connected with someone who's been there, someone who knows the struggle but knows the freedom, and that's going to propel you like it never has before. I changed my life when I did that. When I got plugged into a men's group where that was like a solid group, I was like, this is amazing. It became fun for me.
Yeah.
And now I'm the conversation starter and an introvert still. So, man, that's the biggest thing I would encourage you to do if you, and also don't hesitate. You don't have to wait. Don't let time pass because, man, I'm getting older. I feel like I'm getting older. I'm getting closer to, I'm 30, what am I, 37? I forget. I lose track. I think I'm turning 37 next month.
Okay, so we're the same age then. We're the same.
Wow. Yeah.
36. I'm 36. I'm from 86.
I honestly don't. Okay, I'm 85. So.
Okay. So
yeah.
37. 37.
Right. Gonna be 37 next month then. Yeah.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah. So I would encourage people, man, don't wait. If I tell people all the time, hey, you don't have to get plugged in or connected through my ministry. Just get connected somewhere and don't wait. Because if I could go back, man, I would have started when I was way younger. I would have started this journey. I would have opened up way earlier, and I would have started walking in my calling way sooner. So you could do that now. Hey, why not?
Yeah, I love that. I love that, man. Yeah, because it's the sooner the better, man. And I'm with you on that one. Again, I love that God always works out everything, according to His purposes. He always makes everything work out for the good, But I think at the same time, it doesn't mean that we have to go living our lives making bad decision after bad decision after bad decision.
Yes.
We don't have to stay in that rut, and I wish I would have known. I wish I would have opened up to therapy a lot sooner, man. I always tell people, yes, God, God number one, but you know what? I thank God so much for therapy, man. I thank Him. Like therapy literally it saved my life because it was at a time where it was bad for me, bad emotionally, depression, anxiety, anger, the lust, everything. I mean, it was at a point where I was just exploding in the inside, and it saved my marriage. It saved my marriage, and and I know that there's a lot of people listening right now that take what he's saying, man, and don't waste time. How can they locate you, Mark?
Yeah, my ministry.
How can they contact you?
Ministry website is offlineorg. So it's offline, OFFLINE, inc.org. You can also find me on social media as Mark J the Poet. Mark J the Poet everywhere. I'm also a spoken word artist. Some of my stuff is on YouTube. So Mark J the Poet. That's me.
You gotta check
me if you want.
Check out. Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna put all his links. When I upload this to YouTube and all social media, I'm gonna put all his links, man. But check out his YouTube videos, man. His YouTube videos are dope. His spoken words, man. I love them, bro. They're dope, man. And
I appreciate that.
I remember the one about I want a divorce. I think that's what it's called.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one hit me. That one hit me hard, man. The first time I listened to it, because it was such an expression of when we dig ourselves in this world of pornography. We dig ourselves into this hole. We literally feel like we're not worthy of love.
Yeah,
it literally takes us to a place where we feel like, we don't deserve anyone to be in our life. We don't deserve love. We don't deserve our spouses, our girlfriends, whatever the case may be. We don't deserve it. What would you tell them, people? Just to close, what would you tell them, man? If there's somebody out there that's feeling like that due to their porn addiction?
Yeah, I would say there's no, this is what I love about Jesus so much is there is no love like his love. There's no grace like his grace. He doesn't look at us based on what we've done or haven't done, right? His love covers a multitude of sin. And this is something I remind the guys about too. Look, you don't have to perform well every day in order for God to accept you. You actually get to live and be empowered by his grace to live and make better decisions. So it's like shifting that mindset. No, God's not waiting for you to get it right so he can love on you. No, he wants to love you right now in this moment. And maybe people, they don't want to go to church because they're like, oh, I'm not off. I got to fix things in my life. No, you go to church because you need to be fixed, right? We need some help. And I go to church because I still need help, right? And that's probably a thing to remind folks about too. I still struggle. Yeah. Maybe it's not lust. Maybe I don't get the urges for pornography, masturbation that I used to, but I still get impatient with my wife. Sometimes I complain about dumb things. I get scared, right? Sometimes I avoid situations because I'm like, it makes me uncomfortable. I don't want to do that. God, I don't want to talk to that person, right? I still struggle with fear. So it's different. These other struggles where I'm still battling. And I would say that, man, the Lord is always ready for us. He's always ready as a father. And maybe the wounds of our past cause us to look at God a certain way. Like, because my father made me feel this way, that can influence the way that we look at our Heavenly Father. But that's not who he is. Look at the Bible, and that's who he is. That's the kind of father he is. You can run to him right now. Worry about he'll take care of the details. Don't worry about the details. You just take the first step.
Man, thank you so much, Mark, man. I appreciate it, man. And this was an awesome conversation, man. Awesome conversation. And it even, the comfort level that I felt, man, is, even me being able to open up about some of the experiences that I've gone through with this issue. And, being able to share that with you, man, and have this talk. I know that it's gonna help a lot of people, man. A lot of men and women, men and women alike, and that's our goal. That's our goal, man, to help people to be real, to be authentic, to have these conversations, to encourage them. And thank you so much, Mark, man. Appreciate it. Thank you so much for agreeing to this, man. I can't wait to have you in person because we got to do another one, man.
Let's do
another one, but in person. Hopefully one day I can go up there, or you can come down here to San Bernardino, and we can have this right here live in the studio, man, and get more in depth about certain, even other things, because this is a topic. I think we can go on forever about this topic, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely need a part 2.
Yeah, for sure, man. All right, well, thank you guys, Offbeat Podcast, man. Thank you guys so much. Don't forget to like, hit subscribe, hit the alerts, and then don't forget to follow us on social media. I'm going to have all the links there available in the description, all of Mark's links and social media accounts, everything. They're going to be available right there too, man. Thank you guys for tuning in. This is Offbeat Podcast. Let's go.